welcome back to The Perch from the Wyoming Tribune-Eagle. I'm Noah Zahn, your local government reporter here. Last week, I wrote a story about the 15th Street Railcar Experience. It's been one of the Cheyenne City Council's top goals for the past several years now, but was excluded from their list of priorities this year. The project entails refurbishing 2 old rail cars and a caboose, bringing them to downtown Cheyenne on 15th Street, just west of the Cheyenne Depot Museum. The plan also involves relocating the old Sadie steam engine from Lions Park at the Cheyenne Botanical Gardens to 15th Street. The total plan is estimated to cost $4.8 million, and the first phase of it will only be $3.5 million. But between grant funding and sixpenny sales tax funds, it would only cost the city about $2.2 million. This first phase of the plan entails relocating those cars to 15th Street and hooking them up to utilities. The cars will sit empty but could later be rented out to vendors like a coffee shop or an ice cream shop. However, this would take quite a bit of interior work. The story I wrote highlighted some of the concerns that some council members have about this project, saying that the funds could be better used somewhere else and that the interior renovation of the cars is unrealistic. But supporters of the 15th Street Railcar Experience say that the project is realistic and it is worth the benefit that it will bring to downtown Cheyenne, and not turning back on the investments already made. On The Perch this week, I spoke with council members Dr. Michelle Aldrich, who opposes the project, and Dr. Mark Rinne, who is in favor of continuing this project. I will say there's a brief technical issue around the middle of this conversation when we had to change microphones, so my apologies for that. But I hope you enjoy the conversation nonetheless. Here's Dr. Aldrich and Dr. Rinne. All right, so I'm here with council members Dr. Aldrich and Dr. Rinne. Thank you both for coming in and joining us on The Perch for this week's episode of the podcast. We're talking about the 15th Street Railcar Experience. And I guess, first of all, I know, Dr. Aldrich, you are opposed to it, and Dr. Rinne, you're supportive of it. So I'm not sure, is it too vague to just ask why you're supportive of it or why you're opposed to it first? I'm not sure who wants to take that one.
Well, thank you, Noah, for having us today. I think that I am not opposed to improvements on 15th Street. I think that that is well within our statutory requirements in our community to take care of our infrastructure and to strengthen and build our downtown. And that 15th Street, there has been a lot of private investment put in down there, and it would be nice to see that more utilized. I think the improvements we have planned for 15th Street and that our city engineer, Tom Cobb, have worked on are highly needed and are supported by the community and by the business owners on 15th Street. My concern is literally the rail cars, and that's been my concern since the very beginning. They were given to us by the Union Pacific Railroad, and the Union Pacific Railroad has a tendency to dispose of things by donation that they no longer have use for, and that a lot of times have minimal value and or need a lot of work. And so they were moved out. We accepted 4 rather than 14, which I believe was the original number that they wanted to donate to us or had available to us. And we were able to amend that resolution to accept 4 of those cars. And so those are now parked out on the Swan Ranch. And there's been some work done to them through asbestos removal. But with our changing financial landscape, the changing, feel of what our future may hold, I'm really concerned about the amount of money that it's going to cost to refurbish these to any usable state. And I think that we're really misleading the public when we talk about potential uses of these cars. Right now, the only plan is to make them a static display, meaning that they would not be usable for anything other than looking at. And I think that there are better uses of our funds. So that's really my concern in this whole matter.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And Dr. Rinne?
Well, again, no, I want to thank you for having us here also. This goes back to, this was, in looking back, was on our, when Mayor Collins took office, was one of our first council goals back in 2021, and it's been included in council goals every year since then. So for the last 5 years, the council has voted by a majority to make this this one of our council goals. I think that 15th Street does need rework. It could really be something great for Cheyenne, but this project is not going to happen without the rail cars. The rail cars started out, the whole project started out, as I remember it, was that in January 2021, Councilman Seagrave brought the project up. At that point, he not only talked about 15th Street, but again, we were talking about some kind of bridge over the railroad tracks to link up to the roundhouse. But what I remember him saying at the time is he said, there are 14 magazines out there in regard to skiing and snow skiing and activities. There are 45 in regard to railroads. He said there is a huge market of train bus out there, and we as being a railroad town are not tapping into. And that's really where it started. And then about that same time, the Visit Cheyenne was doing a master plan, and their master plan came out in August 2022. Essentially they said the proposed 15th Street Corridor Improvement Project is a means of honoring the history and growth of the UP that's afforded Cheyenne since its beginnings. They went in to talk about Cheyenne could become a destination for railroad enthusiasts as well as community members. The project will revitalize 15th Street by drawing the community visitors to the area. We can connect the Greenway to it, have improved lighting to improve security in the area. The project would celebrate Cheyenne's railroad heritage with historically refurbished rail cars and become an interactive experience. And then it went on to say that 15th Street was the perfect location for positioning those cars with its proximity to an active rail yard and 80 trains that go through there today and the historic depot. And so that's the vision. And I'm sorry that some of my colleagues just don't buy into that vision, but essentially that was just to add another attraction to downtown and get people to stay a little bit longer and spend some time there. So that's why I'm in favor of it. I have a letter here from Dominic Bravo of Visitors and Convention Bureau with what he thinks the impact would be, and just detailing why they're in support of it. The depot board in the past has been in support of it, so it's something that's been in the works for the last 4 or 5 years, and I think it can be a game changer for 15th Street. And as I said, the rail cars were what started the whole thing, and without the rail cars, the project is not going to happen.
Mm-hmm. And I think one of the concerns I heard from you, Dr. Aldrich, last week when we spoke on the phone was the funds for it. $4.8 million total cost between grants and sixpenny sales tax funds and some from the Cheyenne Depot. The cost burden for the city is closer to $2.2 million. And so I'm curious if either of you could speak to, where that money comes from and what that number means to the city, how much that actually is. Do you want to take that first?
Okay. I can speak to that. Well, Noah, I think that that's one of the things that people need to understand is that we do have a grant. It's called an EDA grant from the federal government for $618,400. That is a reimbursement grant, meaning we have to spend the money before we can ask for reimbursement. As you know, the financial landscape is changing almost daily from Washington, D.C. There is a concern that that money may or may not be available when we finish this project to reimburse us. We're seeing that happen to agencies across the country and to projects. So with that said, quite a bit of that money has been spent, not all of it. The sixpenny match, our voters were very supportive and passed a very successful sixpenny ballot the last time around, which included an amount of money that could be used for grant matches, which is what was used for the required match for that EDA grant. Then we have the $1.4 million is what's being reported by our engineer as the site prep construction for phase 1, which would be really taking on 15th Street, getting that area ready with infrastructure, with widening the sidewalk, putting up the fence along the railroad, installing those 3 cars in that area for this display. And refurbishing the exterior of those cars. It's only for the exterior. There has been some asbestos removal done on those cars. But at this point, that all of that funding would simply be as a static display, meaning that they would not be usable for anything other than just to look at. 2 out of those 4 cars are Southern Pacific cars that don't have a historical significance to the Union Pacific Railroad, which is really the historical railroad connection piece to Cheyenne. And so there's a question as to, there is no doubt in my mind that people would go down and take a look at them. I don't know that people would drive to Cheyenne to look at them. People come here for Big Boy. They come here for our depot, which has recently undergone some renovation and is still being renovated in some aspects. And I'm not convinced that the $1.4 million is worthy of the revenue that would be generated. People that are already here would probably take a look at them, just like they do our boots around town, or just like they do our bronzes downtown. But I'm not convinced that people are actually going to come here specifically to view 3 train cars, 1 or 2 of which are not connected to the Union Pacific and the history of our area.
Mm-hmm. And Dr. Rinne, so is your view that those funds will sort of through the tourism dollars, those funds will eventually pay for themselves?
I do. So the total phase 1, which is all we're talking about now, is $3.4 million, not the 4.8. 4.8 is if you keep on going for improvements in future phases. It's $3.452 million is the estimated cost for phase 1, which is all we're doing now. The city's share of that would be $2.1 million. We do have a $618,400 Economic Development Administration grant that came out of ARPA funds. That cannot be taken away. So I know that's at least according to our grants manager, that cannot be pulled back on us. And I know that was one of the concerns that was identified. The old Sadie grant of $480,000 is from the Donahue Family Trust in Indiana, and that is specifically for STEAM-related projects. And again, that's not going to go away, and there's no timeline on it.
I was just going to say, the $480,000 trust, because this is quite honestly, this is a complex project with a lot of moving parts. And so Old Sadie and the revival of that steam engine that's currently located out at Lions Park through the Botanic Gardens, that $480,000 really, according to my understanding of that family trust, needs to be spent on something that's related to a steam engine or steam trains.
That's what I just said.
Right, yes, that's what you said. But it doesn't mean that it has to be moved. It could actually be, and it probably would take at least a good majority of that funding to simply do the necessary repairs on it where it currently sits. I was talking with a restorations expert who only specializes in railcar restoration this week. And in order to move Old Sadie and to utilize that $480,000 to move her, it would require 2 trees to be cut down at the Botanic Gardens. There was money that was donated by different groups and organizations and individuals to put Sadie there. And while it is a city-owned asset, we have an obligation to people who have contributed to that and wanted to see that display in Lions Park. We have an obligation, I think, to honor that donation and to maintain that. So I would love to see Old Sadie stabilized and refurbished right where she sits, and it's completely doable, and it probably would utilize almost all of that $480,000.
Mm-hmm. And the next thing I wanted to touch on was, one of your concerns is the state of the cars right now. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just curious if you could describe those and what needs to be done, the next steps between now and getting them to 15th Street.
Sure. Well, the asbestos was removed. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, there were some of the fixtures that were salvaged from inside. Not a lot. There is a type of a casing along every single window of one of the cars that only about a 1 foot section was able to be salvaged. The rest of it disappeared or was damaged in the removal. There were some brass sinks that folded out of the walls. Those have disappeared. It's believed that they were probably sold for salvage by the company that did the remediation. So there, unfortunately, that remediation for asbestos, in talking with experts who deal in that, it could have been done simply by painting the interior of the cars to encase the asbestos paper. There was horsehair in the walls, which was common at that time. And so that could have been, there could have been a lot less damage done to those through the asbestos removal process. The floors obviously needed to be replaced, and we've got some holes in the ceilings that will need to be welded and patched. There is a current RFP out right now asking for individuals to consider bidding to do the work to the exterior, to prepare those cars to move them and to make them attractive. One of the pieces of that RFP asked for a black film to be inserted in all the windows, so you would not be able to look in these cars at this point. The windows would be blacked out. It also, in the RFP, and talking with a rail restoration expert and who's been looking at that RFP, that it asked for all of the lead paint to be removed from the exterior. Well, removing that lead paint, one, is a challenge, and secondly, it also could act as a base and could be primed and then painted so that the paint would last longer that's applied to it. So I'm not sure, quite honestly, I'm not sure that we've, as a city, have gotten really good advice from individuals on the steps that should have been taken or could now be taken to do these cars. In looking at these cars, this rail restoration expert told me that we're looking at $1 million per car to get them to the point where they would have any use whatsoever.
So the rail cars have, when they cleanse the asbestos out, they have been gutted. The concept was to when they got moved to along 15th Street, and that's scheduled in about a year from now. That yes, they would be a static display, but we're also going to run water and electricity to them, so that if somebody did want to run a business or a food truck or something out of them, they would be able to do that. At this point in this plan, they are not handicapped accessible. The original plan, they were. I can show you pictures of other rail cars that have been used around the country. It is not that difficult to build a ramp on the south side of them with a little platform that runs along the south side that isn't visible to give them handicapped accessibility. It's not like that's the first time it's been done, and there's no reason we can't add that to overcome that objection. The idea is that they'll be plumbed and have electricity or power to them. So if somebody does want to lease one or convert them into another use, as I said, like a food truck or something, or even a little shop, they would be able to do that.
Have you spoken with some of the downtown business owners along 15th Street there in that area, and sort of whether they're for or against this and what their thoughts are on this?
I've personally only talked to two. As a matter of fact, I had one of them call me as I was driving down here, and he's a big advocate for it. He attended the open house that we had a couple weeks ago at the library and thanked me for doing this and working on this. And there was one individual that was adamantly opposed to it, but our city engineer has spent 2 days last week talking to everybody down there. He's tweaked the plan since doing that. So my understanding is that one individual that was adamantly opposed now said that he's more neutral. He said, I no longer will oppose it. And he was the one that was most outspoken. So I think generally, to me, if you get more foot traffic down there, how can that be a bad thing for businesses in the area? And that's the goal of this. I mean, it's more an economic development vehicle, and it's something that is going to be there for decades. So most of us on council that support it look at it as one of those legacy projects that we're going to leave to Cheyenne that will be a benefit for years to come.
Dr. Aldrich, I know that you're meeting with some of them on Friday. I'm not sure what you've already heard from them, but do you have more to add to that?
So I would agree that I think our city engineer, Tom Cobb, along with the consultants, who we paid an increased dollar amount to by the tune of about $28,000 to do these one-on-one consultations with business owners downtown. They met with them last week. I heard, and I've talked with all but one of those business owners this week. And they were all really pleased with that they were being included in the conversation, which hasn't, always been the case in our experience with our downtown business owners. But one of the concerns that they still have is that they want to see the improvements done to 15th Street. They could care less about the rail cars. They see this as a vehicle to get 15th Street taken care of. We can do that without the rail cars. We can do the improvements without the rail cars. We keep talking about the 3 rail cars. We actually have 4. Nobody's talking about what are we doing with number 4 and when is that going to be taken care of and how are we going to pay for storage once this lease, we currently have a lease that is for 2 years for free under some new ownership out at the Swan Ranch. And when that expires, what do we do with a 4th rail car? Because nobody's really talked about that. So we have a lot of unknowns. Dr. Rinne talked about the possibility of using these as pop-up shops or food trucks or small shops. I don't know that our downtown business owners and our downtown property owners want us to be the city to be landlords. That's not usually the role of a city council or a city government. We have a lot of available commercial space in the downtown area right now, and even more as we speak with businesses that are, have found other locations and have moved out or are in the process of moving out. We have also, a lot of business owners that are paying rents downtown and have similar businesses. I know that one theme that keeps coming up is an ice cream shop. Well, we have 3 ice cream shops within 3 blocks of this location. So I think that for the city to subsidize small business owners and to compete with our local commercial building owners is really just a misstep as far as the city council goes. I think that there are lots of ways to support the economic development and the development of our downtown. I think the improvement of 15th Street, but it doesn't have to include the rail cars.
Yeah, as I said, the rail cars were the reason for doing it. I want to go back and address a couple things. Our city engineer said that the lead paint on the outside has already been covered with a primer to seal it in. And that's been done. Councilwoman, I'm just saying, if you don't think he's telling me the truth, that's what he just said. So, and he said that's been done. And then I wanted to go back to that we couldn't afford to do it, which was a comment made both in the article and earlier. And when Mayor Collins came into office, we had about 60 days worth of reserves. We have saved money, and we have built that up to where we now have 290 days worth of reserves. And for many of us, the idea of that savings was that we could use it on some major projects to enhance Cheyenne, and we have done that. We have used reserves to buy the Beast, and we've used some reserves to build the new gymnastics center. And so those were things that we have done with using those reserves. This is just another project to enhance Cheyenne. I do believe it's an economic development project. Again, I have a quote here from Visit Cheyenne, how they think it's essential, and they have a vested interest in supporting it. And the project, the rail cars were the reason the project got started. And I don't think the project will continue if we remove the rail cars.
I think that if you've looked at the aerial footage that the city engineer has provided, there is only one train car right now that's showing any white spots of any type of paint that's been applied to it. I find it hard to believe that that's all been done if it's in the RFP that's just now being looked at. But I do respect our city engineer and believe that he has a lot of integrity. I think that one of the things that we need to think about is that statutorily, the city council is required to do things like public safety, infrastructure, safe water, waste management. This is an added amenity, if you will. We do not know what the future holds as far as our income. And I think that if we are assuming that the next 4 years are going to be as flush with cash as what the last 4 years was, that we're probably really misrepresenting that to our constituents. And so I think that we need to be fiscally conservative and to, while we don't need to have a ton of money, if we have excess funds, maybe we should put that towards our infrastructure for our BOPU and not raise water rates come next January. There are lots of things we could be doing with that funding besides restoring rail cars for a static display.
Well, as I said, we do currently have the funds, and Board of Public Utilities is an entirely separate animal. We have not commingled funds with theirs for years, so I'm not sure that's something we want to start doing. The funds are, as I said, the funds are in place. I think we've been fiscally responsible if you look the way our reserves have grown, and I think we've taken care of it. You also have to realize that, as you well know, our legislature now seems to be taking a dim view of reserves. So I think at some point, if we have worthwhile projects, we need to move forward with them. And yes, we're supposed to take care of public safety, roads, and the like, but your statement says we're not supposed to do any economic development, and I just disagree with you on that issue. I mean, I think that is part of our role.
I think economic development is an important piece as well, because that's basically the only way we have to increase our revenue is through our tax, sales tax and tax base. But I don't think that's our primary objective. And I think this idea that we have to spend it or the state's going to take it or they're going to hold it against us is really comes down to fear-mongering and encourages spending.
And I believe you saying that we're going to start hurting for money. We are going to have to be fiscally responsible, but I think there's been, if I'm fear-mongering, I think there's been some on both sides. So,
our time is kind of wrapping up here a little bit. I'm not sure if.
Oh,
well, I was going to ask if there's
conversation we've had for a long time.
if there's any questions that you would want to ask each other about this project. I'm not sure.
I just really appreciate the opportunity, and I think that the most important thing is to have the conversation, right, and to engage the 15th Street business owners, to engage our community, and to hear what our constituents have to say. At the end of the day, we're elected by the people to carry out their work and their choices. And I'd love to see some data on a return on investment, on what this investment is going to return and how many years it's going to take to get that investment back.
thank you, Noah. I did want to address one other thing in the article. There was a reference to John Rinne, who used to have a business here, and said that it came from a crook or something like the subheadline. Yeah, and as I said, I remember this starting in January of 2021 at our first goal-setting session coming from Councilman Seagrave. Early on, when Visit Cheyenne was looking at this, Dominic Bravo had put together a committee of which Mr. Rinne was on that committee. He did give a presentation to the council. I didn't even remember it. I had to go back and look through the notes in November of 21. I do have pictures of what they were just kind of drawings and renderings, no specifics at all. It was just very conceptual. But he he partnered in that presentation with Darren Rudloff, who was the former director of Visit Cheyenne. At some point when he got in trouble, he either resigned or was asked to resign from that board. So a month later, on December 21st, 2021, he was resigned and was no longer a part of the process. So I think to say that he had a stamp on this whole thing, I think is inaccurate. As I said, I thought Councilman Seagrave came up with the idea, and I didn't even remember the presentation that had been given to us. Just to conclude, obviously, I think anything that we can do to improve downtown, bring people downtown, spend some time down there, spend a little more time there, spend some extra money there, is worthwhile. And so to me, this is an economic development vehicle. This is a project that can be around for decades, and I think it'll be transformative for 15th Street. So that's why I'm in support of it. Thank you.
Well, that wraps up our time. So thank you, Dr. Aldrich and Dr. Rinne, for joining me in this conversation on the perch, and apologies to both of you for the technical difficulties and to the listener as well, but we're making it work. But I'll look forward to listening to you all continue to have these conversations. Today, Friday the 11th, Dr. Aldrich is meeting with business owners along 15th Street to hear their thoughts about the project and then driving them down to take a look at the rail cars. Dr. Rinne said he and some other council members may attend this meeting as well. Our arts and entertainment reporter, Taylor Staples, is out sick this week, so I'll be bringing you a roundup of some upcoming events in Cheyenne and Laramie County this week, though I admit I may not have the same pizzazz and panache that she brings you every week. Today, April 11th, there will be a Classic Conversations and Lunch and Learn event hosted by the Cheyenne Symphony Orchestra Maestro William Interligator from 12 to 1 p.m. at the library. Then at 8 p.m., there will be a concert with country performer David Lewis at the Lincoln. On Saturday, April 12th, there's the Ladies of the Shrine Craft and Vendor Show from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the Cheyenne Ice and Event Center, and a Festival of Colors celebration at the Cheyenne Botanic Gardens from 1 to 2 p.m. Also on Saturday, adults can learn swing dancing at the library from 5 to 8 p.m., and the CSO will have their second-to-last concert, Fiesta, featuring all Latin American music at 7:30 p.m. at the Cheyenne Civic Center. On Sunday, April 13th, people can learn how to write their own biography from 1 to 3 p.m. at the library, or go play Meow Ingo at Cats and Coffee Connection, also from 1 to 3 p.m. At night, people can go see a comedy show at the Civic Center starring Joe Coy at 7:30 p.m. On Monday, April 14th, Little America will host the monthly Cowgirls of the West Museum luncheon at 11:30 a.m. And on Tuesday, April 15th, the library has an introduction to 3D printing class for adults from 6 to 7 p.m. On Wednesday, April 16th, the library will host a chair yoga and poetry event from 11 to 11:40 a.m., as well as a Library for All event for adults with disabilities from 12:30 to 2:30 p.m. Then, also on Wednesday, from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m., the Cheyenne Creativity Center will have an open studio workshop with local artist Steve Knox. Finally, on Thursday, April 17th, another Thankful Thursday event is happening at the Lincoln Way Event Hall. Doors open at 4 p.m., and this week's nonprofit is the Blue Federal Credit Union Foundation. Also, Blacktooth Brewery is holding its first ever singing competition with the Friday's Sound Surge event at 7 p.m. The winner, voted by those in attendance, will get to be an opener for Fridays on the Plaza this summer. And lastly, the Swan Lake Ballet will perform at the Cheyenne Civic Center at 7:30 p.m. You can visit the full calendar on our website for more. That's all of the events coming up this week. And before we close out today, here's a quick roundup of some of our top stories and headlines from this past week. Affordable housing is not likely to be studied by Wyoming lawmakers for the first time in years. Meanwhile, the topic of studying Wyoming's election process is priority number one for the legislature's Joint Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions Committee this interim. K-12 school boards across the state are up against a tight deadline to implement policies in line with recently passed legislation that will repeal gun-free zones in Wyoming. During Monday night's meeting, the Laramie County School District 1 Board of Trustees began discussing possible concerns and liabilities they would want covered in the district's policy, which has to be enacted by July 1st. Per the new state statute, any adult with a concealed carry permit will lawfully be able to carry on school district campuses. The statute allows districts to make policies that would only affect staff and volunteers. And finally, Wyoming's legislative leaders shook up the interim topic process during their meeting Tuesday by reducing the number of days for interim committees to meet from 6 to 4. The motion was brought by Senate Majority Floor Leader Tara Nethercott to boost efficiency in the legislative process. If you want to learn more or read any of the full stories of those, you can find those in print or on our website, wyomingnews.com. But that's all for this week's episode of The Perch. Thank you for tuning in, and be sure to check back next Friday for more.